We did it.
Ah! Ah, wow, can you believe we made it to Wednesday?
We are
Like
halfway through the week.
like the Mount Everest of the week. Um,
Uh,
Today,
yes.
do you want to hear a boring story?
Yes, let's do it. Let's start the show right.
Should we introduce ourselves first?
Well, I guess
Um,
so.
yeah, I'm Lily Tanner, for those of you who don't know me.
I'm Robert Hansen, for those of you who don't know me.
Don't steal my catchphrase. So, been working on that one for several years. So normally what I do is I like prep my little coffee in my French press and then I butter in after I'm done eating breakfast. And then I go brush my teeth and then I come back and it's done, right?
hmm
So then today I did that. I pressed down the French press, I poured the coffee, and then I was like, oh, I forgot my mask. So I had to go get my mask. I was back in the bathroom. Then I came out. I was like, how did this coffee get here? I like completely forgot that I had, and I was like, oh no, did I just do a stupid and put the water and then immediately push it down? And now I just have like hot water with cream. But then I remembered, I retraced my steps mentally.
I'm glad
And
there
then I
was
took,
not a tragedy.
me too.
What would you have done if you just
Yeah,
had hot water and cream?
I guess I would have just gotten coffee at work.
Ah, you're right, this was a boring story. How could you do this to our
I
poor viewers?
know. I asked your permission and you said yes, so we're equally complicit.
Yep, it is my
Do you have
fault.
a do you I didn't say it was your fault. I said you were equally complicit. Do you have like a story that you want to share?
Uh, no, I don't really have anything interesting that happened today. It was pretty
Neither
basic
do
and
I. See above.
bland. See above. Nah, it was pretty bland and basic. Just did work.
Invoices.
I made an yes.
We don't stop on my account.
I made another invoice, but it was the same invoice, but it needed to be
Oh,
redone because someone had a problem with it.
like it insulted the person's girlfriend.
Yeah, apparently. Like, I don't know how, but apparently the shape of the number 78 on a specific page actually insulted their girlfriend directly. It was wild.
That's I guess tempers are running high in COVID land.
In accounting COVID land, there are issues with 78.
Um, so I asked you if you had any boring stories to share, and you said no. And then you threw that gem on the ground and just watched it shatter. So I think the lesson here is that you really need to learn to value your voice as a storyteller.
Hmm.
And then I guess we have somebody else who actually wants to check in on a lesson that
Oh, okay.
he's trying to teach you. Yeah.
All right.
I mean, hey, what's up? It's me, Milo. I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for asking. Yeah, Robert, have you worked on, did you see those TED Talks I sent you about how it's important not to interrupt people? Man.
Yes, yes, I did. I was trying very hard not to interrupt you there as you responded. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. Before I asked you, anyway, yeah, I've been working hard on working on the whole not interrupting people thing. I think it's going all right. What do you think, Milo?
Yeah, so here's what we're gonna do. Just to do a little exercise, brah, uh on interrupting is I'm just gonna like tell a story from my day. and we're gonna see if you can interrupt me or not. So I woke up this morning, 7 a.m. Uh, just like doing my Milo thing, taking a shower, wearing the towel wrapped around my waist, shaving. I texted Rory. I said, "How's it going, babe? Miss you." Oh, okay, close. And then it said, unable to connect the text to sender. Phone number does not exist. And so I was like, well, this is BS. So I sent her a message on Instagram to Rory, and it said, I'm not Rory. And I was like, stop avoiding me, Rory. And then I was kind of mad at that point. So I watched a few episodes of Modern Family, and then I went to the beach. Now I'm back here.
Yeah, are you finished with your story?
Clearly, I wasn't finished, so now I'm back here, and I'm testing you on if you interrupt people or not, man.
Okay. That certainly felt like an ending, but anyway, um, Milo, I'm concerned that my not interrupting you may actually be enabling some negative behaviors. For one, Milo, Rory Gilmore is not a real human being. She's a fictional
See,
character.
man,
Now
see,
who's
man, this is
interrupting?
where
Now who's interrupting, Milo? You see what you're doing here? You turn this around. You're trying to get me to enable you and your whole Rory thing, but you need to go and you need to find Alexis Bledel, and she is gonna put things straight. You dated her,
oh,
man. Are you okay, Milo? What is happening? Milo.
okay, man. This is where I'm gonna have to throw up a boundary with you because you keep telling me that the woman of my dreams does not exist. Alexis Bledel is not real. Okay? There's only one true Rory Gilmore, and I find her at the end of Phantom Tollbooth. You'll see in the story. And I gotta go because I can't handle people talking this way to me.
Milo. Milo,
Mahalo.
Mahalo. Milo.
That's cool how he says mahalo, but it kind of sounds like Milo. I like
Yeah,
that for him.
Mahalo Milo. So,
Yeah.
do you think Milo's gonna be okay?
I think it sounds like he's doing great. He's trying to connect to Rory. He's throwing up boundaries, which is very healthy. He's teaching, yeah, I think in our personal life, you're much better. You're not interrupting me as much. And so I think these lessons are really paying off.
Am am I the Okay. Is Milo gaslighting me or am I just bad?
I don't think you need to trouble yourself with questions like that. Everything can be everything. Hi guys, welcome to socially distanced reading. It's 8:30. How exciting. Do you want to read some chapters?
On that existential crisis, let's get into it, everybody.
Okay. Let me unlock my Kindle. I'm narrating. Thank God, right, guys? Ugh. Okay. So what happened to Milo from the book? What happened to him right before this? I
You don't remember? Well, guess what, everybody? Milo just got sent on his journey by the king of Dictionopolis himself. And guess what? He's got a new tag along to go along with his best friend Talk the Dog. He's got the
the
humbug.
humbug. Okay.
And that's where we are.
Well,
He's off on an
yeah,
adventure.
just again. Okay. I mean, it's like, what's his name, Milo or Mr. Toad? Am I right, ladies? Okay, chapter 9. It's all in how you look at things. Soon, all traces of Dictionopolis had vanished in the distance, and all those strange and unknown lands that lay between the kingdom of words and the kingdom of numbers stretched before them. It was late afternoon, and the dark orange sun floated heavily over the distant mountains. A friendly, cool breeze slapped playfully at the car, and the long shadows stretched out lazily from trees and bushes.
Ah, the open road!
Exclaimed the humbug, breathing deeply, for now he seemed happily resigned to the trip.
The spirit of adventure! The lure of the unknown! The thrill of a gallant quest! How very grand indeed!
Then, pleased with himself, he folded his arms, sat back, and left it at that. In a few more minutes, they had left the open countryside and driven into a dense forest. This is the scenic route, straight ahead to point of view, announced a rather large road sign. But contrary to his statement, all that could be seen were more trees. As the car reached along, the trees grew thicker and taller and leafier until, just as they'd hidden the sky completely, the forest abruptly ended and the road bent itself around a broad promontory. Stretching below to the left, to the right, and straight ahead, as far as anyone could see, lay the rich green landscape through which they were traveling,
Remarkable view!
announced the humbug, bouncing from the car as if he were responsible for the whole thing.
Isn't it beautiful?
Gasped Milo. Oh, I don't know, answered a strange voice. It's all in the way you look at things,
I beg your pardon?
said Milo, for he didn't see who had spoken. I said it's all in how you look at things, repeated the voice. Milo turned around and found himself staring at two very neatly polished brown shoes, for standing directly in front of him, if you can use the word standing for anyone suspended in midair, was another boy just about his age, whose feet were easily 3 feet off the ground. For instance, continued the boy, if you happen to like deserts, you might not think this was beautiful at all,
That's true.
said the humbug, who didn't like to contradict anyone whose feet were that far off the ground. For instance, said the boy again, if Christmas trees were people, and people were Christmas trees, we'd all be chopped down, put up in the living room, and covered with tinsel, while the trees opened our presents,
What does that have to do with it?
asked Milo. Nothing at all, he answered, but it's an interesting possibility, don't you think?
How do you manage to stand up there?
Asked Milo, for this was the subject which most interested him. I was about to ask you a similar question, answered the boy. You want to hear a boring story? Um, for you must be much older than you look to be standing on the ground,
What do you mean?
Milo asked. Well, said the boy, in my family, everyone is born in the air with his head at exactly the height it's going to be when he's an adult, and then when we all grow toward the ground. When you're fully grown up, or as you can see, grown down, ha 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 ha, our feet finally touch. Of course, there are a few of us whose feet never reach the ground no matter what, no matter how old we get. But I suppose it's the same in every family. He hopped a few steps in the air, skipped back to where he started, and then began again. You must certainly be very old to have reached the ground already,
Oh, no.
said Milo, seriously.
In my family, we all start on the ground and grow up, and we never know how far until we actually get there.
Oh, what a silly system! Oh, ho, 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 the boy laughed. Then your head keeps changing its height, and you always see things in a different way. Why, when you're 15, things won't look at all the same way they did when you were 10, and at 20, everything will change again,
I suppose so.
replied Milo, for he had never really thought about the matter. We always see things from the same angle, the boy continued. It's much less trouble that way. Besides, it makes more sense to roll down and not up. When you're very young, you can never hurt yourself falling down if you're in midair, and you certainly can't get into trouble for scuffing up your shoes or mucking the floor if there's nothing to scuff them on and the floor is 3 feet away. Well, that's very true, thought Talk, who wondered how the dogs in the family liked the arrangement. But there are many other ways to look at things, remarked the boy. For instance, you had orange juice, boiled eggs, toast, jam, and milk for breakfast, he said, turning to Milo. And you were always worried about people wasting time, he said to Talk. And you are almost never right about anything, he said, pointing at the humbug. And when you are, it's usually an accident,
A gross exaggeration!
protested the furious bug, who didn't realize that so much was visible to the naked eye. Amazing, gasped Dog.
How do you know all that?
Simple, he said proudly. I'm Alec Bings. I see through things. I can see whatever is inside, behind, around, covered by, or subsequent to anything else. In fact, the only thing I can't see is whatever happens to be right in front of my nose,
Isn't that a little inconvenient?
asked Milo, whose neck was becoming quite stiff from looking up. A little, replied Alec, but it is quite important to know what lives behind things, and the family helps me take care of the West. My father sees through things, my mother looks after things, my brother sees beyond things, my uncle sees the other side of every question, and my little sister, Alice, sees under things.
How can she see under things if she's all the way up there?
Growled the humbug. Well, said Alec, turning a neat cartwheel, whatever she can't see under, she overlooks.
Would it be possible for me to see something from up there?
Asked Milo politely. You could, said Alec, but only if you try very hard to look at things as an adult does. Milo tried as hard as he could, and as he did, his float floated slowly off the ground until he was standing in the air next to Alec Bings. He looked around very quickly, and an instant later crashed back down to the earth. Interesting, wasn't it? Asked Alec.
Yes, it was.
Agreed Milo, rubbing his head and dusting himself off.
But I think I'll continue to see things as a child. It's not so far to fall.
A wise decision, at least for the time being. Everyone should have his own point of view. Isn't this everyone's point of view? Asked Talk, looking around curiously. Of course not, replied Alec, sitting himself down on nothing. It's only mine, and you certainly can't look at things from someone else's point of view. For instance, from here, that looks like a bucket of water, he said, pointing to a bucket of water. But from an ant's point of view, it's a vast ocean. From an elephant's just a cool drink, and from a fish, of course, it's home. So you see, the way you see things depends a great deal on where you look at them from. Now come along, and I'll show you the rest of the forest. He ran quickly through the air, stopping occasionally to beckon Milo, Talk, and the humbug along, and they followed as well as anyone who had to stay on the ground could.
Does everyone here grow the way you do?
Puffed Alec when he caught up. Or puffed Milo when he had caught up. Almost everyone, replied Alec, and then he stopped for a moment and thought, now and then, though, someone does begin to grow differently. Instead of down, his feet grow up toward the sky. But we do our best to discourage awkward things like that,
What happens to them?
insisted Milo. Oddly enough, they often grow 10 times the size of everyone else, said Alec thoughtfully. And I've heard they walk among the stars. And with that, he skipped off once again toward the waiting woods. Chapter 10! Wow, that was a good one, guys. Okay, Chapter 10, A Colorful Symphony. As they ran, tall trees closed in around them and arched gracefully toward the sky. The late afternoon sunlight leapt lightly from leaf to leaf, slid along branches and down trunks, and dropped finally to the ground in warm, luminous patches. A soft glow filled the air with the kind of light that made everything look sharp and clear and close enough to reach out and touch. Alec raced ahead, laughing and shouting, but soon encountered serious difficulties. For while he could always see the tree behind the next one, he could never see the next one itself and was continually crashing into it. After several minutes of wildly dashing about, they all stopped for a breath of air.
I think we're lost.
Panted the humbug, collapsing into a large berry bush. No tenta! No, he said nonsense, in case you can't understand what he's saying. No tenta! Shouted Alec from the high branch on which he sat.
Do you know where we are?
Asked Milo. Certainly, he replied. We're right here on this very spot. Besides, being lost is never a matter of not knowing where you are. It's a matter of not knowing where you are and I don't care at all about where I'm not. This was much too complicated for the bug to figure out, and Milo had just begun repeating it to himself when Alex said, If you don't believe me, ask the giant. And he pointed to the small house tucked neatly between two of the largest trees. Milo and Toct walked up to the door, whose brass plate read simply, The Giant, and knocked.
Good afternoon.
Said the perfectly ordinary sized man who answered the door. Are you the giant? Asked Toc doubtfully.
To be sure,
He replied proudly.
I'm the smallest giant in the world. What can I do for you? Are we lost?
Said Milo.
That's a difficult question.
Said the giant.
Why don't
Why
you
don't you
go
go
around
around back?
back and ask the little man?
And he closed the door. They walked to the rear of the house, which looked exactly like the front, and knocked at the door, whose nameplate read, The Little Man.
How are you?
Inquired the man, who looked exactly like the giant. Are you the little man? Asked Toc again, with a hint of uncertainty in his voice.
Unquestionably.
He answered.
I'm the tallest little man in the world. May I help you?
Um,
Oh dear. Do you think we're lost?
repeated Milo.
That's a very complicated problem.
He said,
Why don't you go around to the side and ask for the fat man?
and he too quickly disappeared. The side of the house looked very like the front and back, and the door flew open the very instant they knocked.
How very nice of you to come by.
Exclaimed the man, who could have been the little man's twin brother. You must be the fat man, said Toc, learning not to count too much on appearances.
The thinnest one in the world.
He replied brightly. But if you have any
Have any
questions,
questions? I suggest
No,
you try
sorry.
the thin man on the other side of the house.
Just as they suspected, the other side of the house looked the same as the front, the back, and the side, and the door was again answered by a man who looked precisely like the other three.
What a pleasant surprise.
He cried happily.
I haven't had a visitor in as long as I can remember. How long is that?
Asked Milo.
I'm sure I don't know.
He replied.
Now, pardon me, I have to answer the door.
But you just did, said Toc.
Oh, yes, I'd forgotten.
Are you the fattest thin man in the world? Asked Toc.
Do you know one that's fatter?
He asked impatiently.
I think you're all the same man.
said Milo emphatically.
Shh!
He cautioned, putting his finger up to his lips and drawing Milo closer.
Do you want to ruin everything? You see, to tall men, I'm a little man. And to short men, I'm a giant. To the skinny ones, I'm a fat man, and to the fat ones, I'm a thin man. That way I can hold four jobs at once. As you can see, though, I'm neither tall, nor short, nor fat, nor thin. In fact, I'm quite ordinary. But there are so many ordinary men that no one asks their opinion about anything. Now, what is your question? Are we lost?
Asked Milo once again,
Hmm.
said the man, scratching his head.
I haven't had such a difficult question in as long as I can remember. Would you mind repeating it? It slipped my mind.
Milo asked the question again.
My.
The man mumbled.
I know one thing for certain. It's much harder to tell whether you are lost than whether you were lost, for on many occasions where you're going is exactly where you are. On the other hand, you often find that where you've been is not at all where you should have gone. And since it's much more difficult to find your way back from some place you've never left, I suggest you go there immediately, and then decide if you have any more questions. Please, ask the giant.
And he slammed his door and pulled down the shade. I hope you're satisfied, said Alec when they'd returned from the house, and he bounced to his feet, bent down to awaken the snoring humbug, and started off, more slowly this time, in the direction of a large clearing.
Do many people live here in the forest?
Asked Milo as they trotted along together. Oh, yes, they live in a wonderful city called Reality, he announced, smashing into one of the smaller trees and sending a cascade of nuts and leaves to the ground. It's right this way. And a few more steps, the forest opened before them, and off to the left, a magnificent metropolis appeared. The rooftops shone like mirrors, the walls glistened with thousands of precious stones, and the broad avenues were paved in silver.
Is that it?
Shouted Milo, running toward the shining streets. Oh no, that's only a illusion, said Alec. The real city is over there.
What are illusions?
Milo asked, for it was the loveliest city he'd ever seen. Illusions, explained Alec, are like mirage. And realizing that this didn't help much, he continued, and mirages are things that aren't really there, that you can see very clearly,
How can you see something that isn't there?
yawned the humbug, who wasn't fully awake yet. Sometimes it's much simpler than seeing things that are, he said. For instance, if something is there, you can only see it with your eyes open, but if it isn't there, you can see it just as well with your eyes closed. That's why imaginary things are often easier to see than real ones. Then where is reality? Barked Talk. Right here! Cried Alec, waving his arms. You're standing in the middle of Main Street. They looked around very carefully. Talk sniffed suspiciously at the wind, and the humbug gingerly stabbed his cane in the air, but there was nothing at all to see. It's really a very pleasant city, said Alec as he rolled down the street, pointing out several of the sights, which didn't seem to be there, and tipping his cap to the passersby. There were great crowds of people rushing along with their heads down, and they all appeared to know exactly where they were going as they darted down and around the non existent streets and in and out of the missing buildings,
I don't see any city.
said Milo very softly. Neither do they, Alec remarked sadly. But it hardly matters, for they don't miss it at all.
It must be very difficult to live in a city you can't see.
Milo insisted, jumping aside as a line of cars and trucks went by. Not at all, once you get used to it, said Alec. But let me tell you how it happened. And as they strolled along the bustling and busy avenue, he began. Many years ago, on this very spot, there was a beautiful city of fine houses and inviting spaces, and no one who lived here was ever in a hurry. The streets were full of wonderful things to see, and the people would often stop to look at them.
Didn't they have any place to go?
Asked Milo. To be sure, continued Alec. But as you know, the most important reason for going from one place to another is to see what's in between, and they took great pleasure in doing just that. Then one day someone discovered that if you walked as fast as possible and looked at nothing but your shoes, you would arrive at your destination much more quickly. Soon everyone was doing it. They all rushed down the avenues and hurried along the boulevard, seeing nothing of the wonders and beauties of their city as they went. Milo remembered the many times he'd done the very same thing, and as hard as he tried, there were even things on his own street that he couldn't remember. No one paid any attention to how things looked, and as they moved faster and faster, everything grew uglier and dirtier. And as everything grew uglier and dirtier, they moved faster and faster. And at last, a very strange thing began to happen. Because nobody cared, the city slowly began to disappear. Day by day, the buildings grew fainter and fainter, and the streets faded away until at last it was entirely invisible. There was nothing to see at all.
What did they do?
Said the humbug inquired, suddenly taking an interest in things. Nothing at all, continued Alec. They went right on living here just as they'd always done, in the houses they could no longer see, and on the streets which had vanished because nobody had noticed a thing. And that's the way they have lived to this very day,
Hasn't anyone told them?
asked Milo. It doesn't do any good, Alec replied, for they can never see what they're in much too of a hurry to look for,
Why don't they live in the illusions?
suggested the humbug.
It's much prettier.
Many of them do, he answered, walking in the direction of the forest once again. But it's just as bad to live in a place where what you do see isn't there as it is to live in a place where what you don't see is.
Perhaps someday you can have one city as easy to see as illusions and as hard to forget as reality.
Milo remarked. That will only happen when you bring back rhyme and reason, said Alex, smiling, for he had seen right through Milo's plans. Now let's hurry or we'll miss the evening concert. They followed him quickly up a flight of steps which couldn't be seen and through a door which didn't exist. In a moment, they had left reality, which is sometimes a hard thing to tell, and stood in a completely different part of the forest. The sun was dropping slowly from sight, and stripes of purple and orange and crimson and gold piled themselves on top of the distant hills. The last shafts of light waited patiently for a flight of wrens to find their way home, and an anxious group of stars had already taken their places. Here we are! Cried Alec, and with a sweep of his arm, he pointed toward an enormous symphony orchestra. Isn't it a grand sight? There were at least 1,000 musicians ranged in a great arc before them. To the left and right were the violins and cellos whose bows moved in great waves, standing behind them in numberless profusion, the piccolos, flutes, clarinets, oboes, bassoons, horns, trumpets, trombones, and tubas were all playing at once. At the very rear, so far away they could hardly be seen, were the percussion instruments. And lastly, in a long line up one side of a steep slope, were the solemn bass fiddles. On a high podium in front of the Okay. On a high podium in front stood the conductor, a tall, gaunt man with deep set eyes and a thin mouth, placed carelessly between his long pointed nose and his long pointed chin. He used no baton, but conducted with large sweeping movements, which seemed to start at his toes and work slowly up through his body and along his slender arms and end finally at the tips of his graceful fingers.
I don't hear any music.
Said Milo. That's right, said Alec. You don't listen to this concert, you watch it. Now pay attention. As the conductor waved his arms, he molded the air like handfuls of soft clay, and the musicians carefully followed his every direction. What are they playing? Asked Talk, looking up inquisitively at Alec. The sunset, of course. They play it every evening, about this time,
They do?
said Milo quizzically. Not to worry, answered Alec. And they also play morning, noon, and night, when of course it's morning, noon, or night. Why, there wouldn't be any color in the world unless they played it. Each instrument plays a different one, he explained, and depending, of course, on what season it is and how the weather to be, the conductor chooses his score and directs the day. But watch, the sun has almost set, and in a moment you can ask Chroma himself. The last colors slowly faded from the western sky, and as they did, one by one the instruments stopped until only the bass fiddles, in their somber, slow movement, were left to play the night, and a single set of silver bells brightened the constellations. The conductor let his arms fall limply at his sides and stood quite still as darkness claimed the forest.
That was a very beautiful sunset.
Said Milo, walking to the podium.
It should be.
Said was the reply.
We've been practicing since the world began.
And reaching down, the speaker picked Milo off the ground and set him on the music stand.
I am Chroma the Great,
He continued, gesturing broadly with his hands.
conductor of color, maestro of pigment, and director of the entire spectrum. Do you play all day long?
Asked Milo when he had introduced himself.
Ah, yes, all day, every day.
He sang out, then pirouetted gracefully around the platform.
Oh my. I only rest at night, and even then, they play on. What would happen if you stopped?
Asked Milo, who didn't quite believe that color happened that way.
See for yourself!
Roared Chroma, and he raised both hands high over his head. Immediately, the instruments that were playing stopped, and at once all color vanished. The world looked like an enormous coloring book that had never been used. Everything appeared in simple black outlines, and it looked as if someone with a set of paints the size of a house and a brush as wide could stay happily occupied for years. Then Chroma lowered his arms. The instruments began again, and the color returned.
You see what a dull place the world could be without color?
He said, bowing until his chin almost touched the ground.
But what pleasure to lead my violins in a serenade of spring green, or hear my trumpets blare out the blue sea, and then watch the oboes tint it all in warm yellow sunshine. And the rainbows are best of all, and blazing neon signs and taxi cabs with stripes and the soft muted tones of a foggy day. We play them all.
As Chroma spoke, Milo sat with his eyes open wide, and Alec, Talk, and the humbug looked on in wonder.
Now I really must get some sleep.
Chroma yawned.
We've had lightning, fireworks, and parades for the last few nights, and I've had to be up to conduct them. But tonight is sure to be quiet.
Then, putting his large hand on Milo's shoulder, he said,
Be a good fellow and watch my orchestra till morning, will you? And be sure to wake me at 5:23 for the sunrise. Good night. Good night. Good night.
and with that, he left lightly from the podium and in 3 long steps vanished into the forest. That's a good idea, said Talk, making himself comfortable in the grass as the bug grumbled himself quickly to sleep and Alex stretched out in midair. And Milo, full of thoughts and questions, curled up on the pages of tomorrow's music and eagerly awaited the dawn. God, that's the end.
Wow,
Oh,
guys.
no, we have to stop. Oh,
So
there's so
exciting.
much good stuff coming up. Wow. Okay, thank you for being here. Really good work, everybody. Um, Audience, you've been great. Orange, Orange has been great. Everybody's doing great. Um, Come on Sunday to see what happens
Yeah, we
with
gotta find
Milo.
out what happens. Milo's been given a task, everybody.
Milo and Talk. Will his voice become consistent again? This Orange, Alec Bing, Robert's characters.
What will happen, everyone? What will
Okay,
happen?
I don't know. Tune in on Sunday. Okay,
Bye,
bye.
everyone.